I think a lot of people get confused by the term sportswear, and I think it's something that isn't even clear to a lot of designers. Sportswear is about clothing that is not athletic in nature. So a tracksuit isn't sportswear. A tracksuit is an athletic item of clothing. Sportswear is about clothing that is intrinsically democratic. It's widely accessible, but it's more about a way of designing that means that a collection is integrated and works well within itself. It usually consists of pieces or items like a top, a trouser, a skirt, a jacket, a coat, essentially wardrobe staples that all integrate and work well together. And then the fabrications are usually tactile, they're practical, they're easy to care for, and that really, in a nutshell, is sportswear. The reason I decided to approach publishers about the possibility of writing a book on this particular subject came from the fact that I've spent most of my jobbing career as a commercial sportswear designer or as a commercial designer working for sportswear brands. Over the course of the years, I've accrued a lot of knowledge on the subject, and the reason I worked for these designers in turn came from the fact that as a student it was the principal area of design that I was most interested in. Bloomsbury was particularly interested in the project because I'm taking my point of view as a designer and then placing that within a historical context. The way that I structured the book is I basically broke it into 10 decades, and for every decade I chose one or two principal designers, and then I've also added a Q&A as well as a brief timeline and a biography. I just took 1920 as a starting point because it was a very galvanizing point in time. Basically, you had Chanel, who was a young woman at the time, and you had Jean Patou, who was a young man at the time. Jean Patou started out designing sports-minded clothing, and by that he meant clothing that was suitable for athletic pursuits, but it was also a more relaxed and easy way of dressing. So he used a lot of jersey, he used a lot of fabrics that were very comfortable and easy to wear. And Chanel is another designer that comes to mind as being very important at the onset of the movement because she designed clothing that appealed to herself as a young, liberated, in every sense, woman who was very much part of a new generation in a new era. You don't look at designers in terms of what they have become in terms of a legacy. You look at what they actually were like as living, breathing people. Claire McCardell became incredibly important in the war era, and she invented things like the popover, which was a challenge that was set to her by Harper's Bazaar at the time, and it was essentially a $7 denim little shift that you popped over your dress, hence the name popover. It was extremely inexpensive, it came with a matching oven glove, and it was an extremely practical, democratic garment that was meant for mass distribution. She very much was influenced by European design, but she wasn't intimidated by it, and she very much wanted to put an American stamp on it and an American spirit. For the 60s, I chose Rudi Gernreich. He's not that well known, but I thought he was more interesting than Cardin or other designers that were very important at that time because he managed, as a former dancer, to translate clothing into the whole idea of clothing that moves with the body and is very body conscious. He managed to translate that very well into something that was appealing to a wide range of people. And my Q&A for that era is Mary Quant, which I'm very excited about. For the 30s, I covered Madeleine Vionnet because she invented bias cut dressing, and that was obviously an extremely democratic way to dress because tall people could wear it, short people could wear it, skinny people could wear it, fat people could wear it. It's something that worked for everybody. For the 50s, I focused on Balenciaga because he was a luxury designer, but what he was very, very good at was paring clothing down to its essence, and he was also, on a technical level, obviously incredibly genius. So he is important from that perspective. For the 70s, I focused on Halston predominantly. And for the 80s, I go into Calvin Klein. The 90s, I focused on Helmut Lang. And then for the noughties, I think Alexander Wang is the most interesting designer that we can classify as a modern sportswear designer. I have Q&As with people working within the industry, and it ranges from stylists to models to designers to curators to journalists. So really I've tried to make it as complete in scope as possible. I love design that stands the test of time, and that goes for architecture, it goes for furniture design, but I also think it's very relevant to apparel design, and I think a Vionnet dress still holds up well, even if it was made in the 30s. And the way that you can distinguish really good design from bad design is design that is timeless. Landfill clothing is very dangerous. It's something that has its purpose, but I think it's something that also needs to be counterbalanced with investment purchases. And I think buying something for the long haul is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think it's something that will come back in vogue again.